Welcome to the Relationship Revivalists podcast. My name is John, and I am here with my amazing wife and co-host, Jess.
Oh, thanks, John.
You are so welcome.
You're pretty amazing yourself.
Well, I try.
And very handsome, too.
I try. And, honestly, you are the woman that I've always wanted, so you're awesome as well.
Oh. You definitely exceeded everything on my man list.
Well, thank you. So anyways, let's talk about what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
And we've gone through a lot of things through the last 20 weeks now. We're on episode 21 now.
That's exciting.
Isn't it really?
Yeah.
We're a fifth of the way to 100.
Wow.
And, that really speaks volumes. And I think that our audience is really getting a lot of value out of our podcasts.
Well, I really appreciate our audience and the ones who tune in every week. It's just really great to know that that we're helping somebody.
Yeah. So what are we going to talk about today?
Well, today we're going to talk about something that has probably happened to pretty much everyone who's ever been in a relationship before. And that thing is, have you ever had a situation where you had one opinion and your spouse had a different opinion and you just weren't agreeing?
Oh, I think that's kind of common in today's world and yesterday's world and probably the future's world too. It's disagreement. But how in the world are we going to give people a solution to this that everyone can agree on?
Well, I don't know if everyone will agree on it, but that's really not why we're here today.
Well, this is true.
But there are times, most of the time, I think, usually between spouses that, especially if, even if you have different ways of thinking about a certain topic and things like that, if you really, earnestly believe a certain way and just really lay out why you believe that way, most of the time there's not a huge conflict. Most of the time we just needed to know a little bit more information before we agreed or really needed to know our spouse's heart on the issue, and then we see it a different way. But there are, bigger times usually when there's just agreeing is just not happening. And it might be over like some major issue, like maybe something to do with the kids or maybe the prospect of quitting a job and going for a new career or something like that. There's some major issues that happen during life, and no matter if it's a small issue or a major issue, we want to make sure that we don't have discord and contention in our marriages. And we're not talking about, one just always saying yes to please the other one. That is not a good relationship. And if that's happening, you need to reevaluate that. But what we're talking about is a healthy relationship, and you just don't feel the same way and you're not able to agree. What do you do?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think we've got a few little scenarios that we can actually help you guys if you ever come across this scenario of disagreement with your spouse or...
Yeah, and there are a few possibilities that could happen if you're not agreeing. One could be where, maybe somebody always caves and ends up saying, okay, let's do it your way. That's not always great. Sometimes, it is important to find a kind of a middle ground and do that, and sometimes usually you take turns, like saying, okay, we'll do it your way this time, but we'll do it my way next time, or however that works out for you. And then there, it's possible that one spouse will just kind of push the issue and just kind of railroad the other person. That's no good either.
Yeah, and I've seen that happen a lot.
Whether it's the husband or the wife, they feel so strongly about something, they don't care what the other one thinks. And that's really not good at all. There's a lot of issues that would arise from that. And, since we believe that God should be the head of the home, one major thing to do is go to him.
Oh, I think you're onto something here.
I think I am too. Yeah. And so like, that's such an important thing to do.
Yeah, and so it begs the question, you've got two people here that are disagreeing, and now we're saying, go to God. And what the possibilities are, people will put their own interest into things, and then they'll say, well, yeah, I went to God, and this is what he told me. And it never, well, I won't say never, but it can a lot of time come back with different answers. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you were earnestly, sincerely going to God, and I would suggest in a situation like this where you two are not agreeing at all, go to God individually. Get quiet with him and really earnestly seek his word on the situation, because he does have an opinion about everything we do. He cares about the small and the big.
He created us. So
he created us. He is right here with us. He's so close. He's closer than our very breath. So why wouldn't he have an opinion? And of course, his opinion would be the right way to do things
right.
every time. And the cool thing about God is he always agrees with himself. He will never be in disagreement with himself. And so if you're both earnestly seeking God, is it possible to come up with two different answers?
Absolutely not.
No. If you are, that means you have your ego and your pride in the way, and you are trying to push the issue.
Okay.
Yikes.
So, yeah.
That's not good at all. And so in a situation like that, it really comes down to, are you going to push the issue no matter what? No matter if it might be the worst thing for your family? Or are you going to put your pride away and do what God says to do?
The logical option there is to do what God says to do. But, I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate here.
That's awesome.
And, there are couples that are out there that would say, well, we went to God, but he never came back and told us anything.
Oh.
And so because we don't think that God even answered us, we're just going to go by whoever wins out on this discussion and this disagreement. What would you say to that?
Well, that's really kind of, first of all, and I'm going to sound really mean here, I think. But first of all, it's really hard to believe that you asked God a question and he never answered you. Like, how much time did you give him? Did you give him a second and he started to open his mouth and you're like, oh, I didn't hear him. I'm going to have my way. It's hard for me to believe that because, first of all, God's always talking to us.
Yeah.
We just have to tap into the right wavelengths. And so it might be an issue with our listening ears, our spiritual ears. Maybe they're not tuned in correctly. Maybe we haven't practiced hearing his voice.
Maybe we've never heard his voice enough as we've never heard it and don't have a history with that, so we don't know what to listen to for.
Yeah. So that might be an issue to practice before you get to a position like this where you need to make sure you hear his voice.
Yeah, so there's lots of verses in the Bible that explain to you how to listen and hear his voice. Many books have been written about it. So, you do need to learn how to hear God's voice.
And it's so important because if God's the head of your home, and we've talked about a three-legged stool before and a three-braided cord before, if he is supposed to be such a vital part of our home and our marriage, why would we treat him like a silent partner that we don't have to listen to?
Yeah, that's good. So, so here's another scenario that I think may happen a lot, and you probably alluded to it earlier, but I want to make sure that we really cover the bases here.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so here's an instance, and this may be flip-flopped because, we have male and female. So I'm just going to say, okay, the male is pushing his ideas, and he's like, okay, we're not getting the right answer here from God, so let's both go to God and find out what his word is on the issue. They give him some time, they come back, and this is where the fight happens, where he says, well, I know I got something from God, and this is the final answer, and won't give in. What's going on here?
Well, a couple possibilities are going on. Either one or both are still pushing for their own way, and so they're saying they heard God, and maybe they earnestly think they did, but one of them didn't, because like I said before, God always agrees with himself. He's not going to tell one thing to one and something to somebody else, and so in that case, you have to do it again, and you have to keep doing it until you agree.
Okay, so how do you know that you are the one that's getting the right answer?
That's a good question. As you build up that history with God and hearing his voice, you're going to know. You're going to know. And then you can pray for your spouse that their ears will be open to listening too. And it might take a little while, but, really I really can't think of a situation where a snap decision has to be made right then and there that you can't agree on. Because usually in an emergency situation, you both work as a team. Right? It would be pretty strange if a husband and wife were in an emergency situation, their child is bleeding, let's say, and they can't agree to call 911. That would be... Right.
That's like a given almost right there.
Why would you never see that? And so we're not talking about those kinds of situations. We're talking about where, there's a choice to be made. Like if someone's bleeding, there's no choice. You have to call 911. You have to,
Yeah, I mean,
you have to administer the right things that the person needs at the time. So that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, kind of big family decisions and things like that where it might be hard to agree on something.
Do we move to San Diego? Do we move to New York?
I have. Now, this might not seem like a big decision, but to a 10-year-old, it was a huge decision. And so I have a little scenario on my own. So my dad lived and was raised on a farm for a very long time. His belief that animals should only be outside. They are not for indoors. Okay. And my mom was raised where she had some pets. They were kind of indoor, outdoor. It wasn't like a hard, fast thing, no animals inside. And so she was pretty neutral. And so there was my dad, no dogs in the house. My mom, neutral. And then me, who wanted a pet, wanted a dog more than anything. Okay? And so we had kind of three different opinions right there. Well, thankfully my dad was okay with this and didn't just say no, right? But my mom suggested, why don't the three of us pray and then share?
Because she was neutral, right?
Right, she was neutral on it. She was fine either way. But she, respected my dad's opinion, but also saw the pain that I was feeling by not being able to have a dog. And, I was a good kid, too. And so it wasn't like, well, you didn't clean your room. I mean, not that I was great at cleaning my room. I really wasn't. But I was a very good kid. I was responsible. And they knew that. And so it wasn't like, oh, we're going to, we're wondering if she's going to take care of him after we get a dog, that kind of thing. So, and I was very, very obedient. And so that worked in my favor. But to make this story short, we did that. We prayed, and then we each got by ourselves to listen to what God said. And a miraculous thing happened.
Tell us, do tell.
When we got back together again to share what God told us, we all got the same answers.
Wow.
So it does work. I absolutely know it. I have personal experience. It does work. And the coolest part of it was my dad, who was so set against having animals in the house, said God told him. Now, this took so much humility, and I'm so impressed by this, but he said God told him, do not deny her this. And guess what? My mom and I got to go to the local pound or whatever, picked out this darling little dog, and he was a very good friend for a long time.
That's an awesome story.
Yeah.
So I think we've covered a lot of different ways to handle disagreements between you and your spouse. Definitely just give this a shot, play around with it and see what happens, because, your eyes, your ears, your senses are just going to be amazed at what you find.
And, instead of looking at it like, oh, this might be cause for a fight if we don't hear the same thing, think of it a different way. Like, this might take a lot of stress off of my spouse and I.
Yeah.
Because, fighting and contention is very stressful to your house, to yourselves, and to you as a couple. And this could take a lot of stress off when you give it to the Lord. Like, Lord, we're giving this to you, and we want your answer on it. And you know what? When you get God's answer on it, he always gives the best answers, because he's seen it all. He's been there already. He knows what's going to happen and what's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's amazing, just offloading those stresses onto him and not pulling them back onto yourself.
That's a real key right there, John.
And you can go on and live stress-free because you've given it to God. God is going to work this thing out for you in the best possible manner that he can for you and him. It's absolutely mind-blowing that we have a God that is so loving and caring, cares about the nth degree of details. And I tell you, love is in the details.
Well, that's good.
And, I've seen this firsthand going back to when I was with my last wife and she was sick with cancer. And I tell you what, that is an emotional run anyways. And when you have things happen at the very split second that they need to happen, God's hand is over you, and that really speaks volumes about God and his love for me, for you, and for everyone here. That he wants everyone to love him, and wants everyone.
Well, he is love, and so he can't possibly. He has to love.
Exactly.
Right. That's who he is.
Yeah. So we are at the end of our time here. We want to definitely thank you for listening. If we would ask you, just go to iTunes or wherever you're listening to this podcast, go to that site and just give us a review of what you think of us. We would appreciate, the top billing, but, we do know that not everyone's going to like us, but we try to serve you guys as best as we can. One last thing. Go over to our website at therelationshiprevivalists.com/7 secrets. All one word, there's no space there. And download our ebook. It is the best thing since sliced bread.
In our humble opinion.
There we go. We got 7 secrets for you that you may not have thought about to keep a relationship going. So I encourage you to go there, and we will see you in the next edition of our podcast.
Bye-bye.